Good morning, YouTube. It's early morning in the great state of Texas, and today we are going to be building another table. And you guys have seen me build some tables in the past. Obviously, last week we built a teak resin table, and it came out pretty good. But this week I wanted to try a little bit different technique. So essentially what I have are two prefabricated cutouts and a fence, not a fence post, but like a mailbox post. And these things are pretty thick. I've used these before in the past, and I'm going to do something a little bit different today. So I've gotten pretty good about making tables. I've learned from my previous techniques, and essentially I'm going to take this and I'm going to power carve this into like a cool cylindrical shape essentially. So what we're doing here is just measuring up the actual piece so that we can get this cut down on the bandsaw and then start the process of making this table. And yes, I will openly admit that using prefabricated pieces is kind of cheating, but I don't have the tools in the shop to make every part that I need. So we get this measured up, and then we're going to take this over to the bandsaw, and this always causes me to have a pucker factor because I'm always worried that this thing is going to come back and jump on me when I use the miter saw. But luckily, we cut that piece down, no problem there. So essentially this bottom piece here that's prefabricated and cut, all we're doing is trying to find the center of it, and then we're going to get this mounted. So this project seems fairly easy. So all we're doing here is just basically taking the top and the bottom of the table and just mounting them. This is the first part of the video here, and this is relatively straightforward. Once you find the center of it, then you just take a little bit of wood glue, and then we're going to take some screws and then just get that mounted. And here I am on the floor trying to see where everything goes, using my drill to, we're going to drill some prefabricated holes here so that they have some kind of guide, and we're just going to hope we hit the center of this so it doesn't blow out on us. So just a little bit of glue just to get everything kind of started and mounted, and then we're going to center that the best that we can, and then we'll just go ahead and drill these holes. And I've learned from my previous mistakes, use your impact driver. If you're going to use these kinds of screws, use an impact driver because that just seems to go a lot better. And I'm using, I forget how big these are, but these are essentially deck screws, and those go in no problem using the impact driver there. So then once we got that mounted, we have two screws in there, and then we're just going to finish it up with a third just to make sure that it's secure enough and it stays in place. So this part's going relatively smooth, and you can see there that's essentially where we're going to have the top of the actual piece here, and then we're going to do the same thing that we did with the bottom. And I've used some different legs in the previous videos that we've done with these kinds of tables. Go and watch Blacktail Studio. He does something very similar, except he doesn't use prefabricated pieces. He has access to really good quality woods and does something a little bit different. But essentially, he built a couple of tables on his channel that are kind of in this style, and this is absolutely cheating for me, I will admit, because these pieces are already prefabricated. So yes, this is cheating, but I never claimed to be an expert woodworker, and this is just kind of my way. So here we are, just taking everything in, and then we're just going to go ahead and mount this exactly the same way that we did the bottom here. Obviously two different sizes, and one's the top, one's the bottom, but this goes relatively smooth in spite of just how wacky tobacky this looks of me just being on the floor trying to find out where exactly the center is. This part actually goes pretty smooth, and then again we're just doing the same thing that we did with the bottom, just making sure everything is centered, and then coming back and prefabricating some guide holes there, and then we're just going to put those deck screws in there, and it goes relatively smooth. Bad thing about these prefabricated boards though, you can see kind of here on the left toward the middle of the screen, there's already like a giant gap, but everything's pretty centered pretty evenly, so I'm pretty happy about how this part turned out. Not a whole lot of issues here, just making sure everything is nice and centered, and it is. So then we go to probably the best part of this. So I actually bought this shaping disc like 4 or 5 years ago. A buddy of mine had sent me a YouTube video or an Instagram reel of people doing something called power carving. So essentially what you do is take a 4.5 inch grinder and take a piece of wood and you kind of shape it into other, pieces that you want it to be shaped into. Essentially, you're just carving wood. And I've never done this technique before. Again, go watch Blacktail Studio. He does this technique and does a pretty good job about it. So here I am with that top portion of that board or this post, and I'm just practicing, essentially trying to get a feel for what this is going to do once I start it. So I'm like, okay, this seems pretty straightforward. And so I take it outside and got all my PPE on. I got gloves, I got a face shield, I don't have a respirator, but here we are. And sorry for the camera work, it will get better here in a couple of minutes, or a couple of seconds actually. And I'm just carving down this square piece into like something round and circular, essentially. So here we are. You can see we're just eating away at this material. And the bad thing about doing this in Texas in the summertime is that battery gets super duper hot. I had to start and stop this about 4 or 5 times to let the battery charge, and then it overheated, and I just couldn't get this to be consistent. So I had to start and stop this several different times. I actually had to put the actual saw into the freezer in my beer fridge in my garage because it was so hot. So that was kind of a problem. I think I'm probably going to get one that has a power cord on it because I think that'll probably end up a little bit better for me. But here we are, just carving this down. I'm using that grinding disc, and I'm going to come back and hit it with a sander. Don't worry about that. But this part, it takes a couple hours to do between all the battery charges and everything. But essentially it's coming out, shaping up pretty well. So I'm pretty happy how this is turning out already. I'm excited about it. A new technique. I always love using new techniques when I, woodwork. And yes, there will be a different iteration of this table, but it's going pretty smooth. And then I took that grinding disc off and then came back with a 40 grit metal sander. Essentially, that's what this is here. So I took off the grinding wheel and then put on the sander on this one. So this is about 40 grit, and then we're just trying to get the nice shape that we want it to be. And yes, it doesn't look pretty, it's pretty ugly, but this is the first generation of this table, and I like it, and I'm having a good time doing this. So then I decided to kind of shape the bottom of the actual table itself, and this was kind of just like a last minute decision on my part, but I'm really happy how this looked, and I just decided to go for it once I started it. And yes, there will be another portion of this table that I'm going to make another one, but I could have done a whole lot better job as far as like the sanding and everything goes. But the shape of the table essentially I like, but overall I'm kind of on the fence about it in the end. But these guide holes before I did anything else, and then I tried to fill these things before I started the sanding portion of it. So this is the top of the table here. Oh, excuse me. So I tried to do that, didn't work out the way that I wanted it to, but I should have done this first before I even mounted the table. I should have done all of the sanding before I did anything. But I've learned from my previous mistakes, and the reason why we're sanding it, and you think that, hey, this table's going to be over with, this is like boring just pine. So here I am, sanding everything done, and then I come back and try to fill those gaps again, and I've done this technique before. That's why I don't understand why I had such a hard time doing this. But I'm like, okay, here I am just making this mud putty paste out of this and just not getting anywhere with it. And yes, it's an ugly, sloppy technique, but here I am just trying to fill those and just kind of failing at it. And in spite of just, trying new things on this table, a lot of failures on this one, but overall the table's going to come out meh, I would say, for the most part. But this was definitely a way not to do that. So watching previous videos, the reason why we had to do the sanding is because we're going to stain this table. So not only are we using carving techniques, but we're also we're staining something. So this is a dulled yellow color. So I've watched a couple of videos on how to stain tables, and pre-stain seemed like it was super duper important after the sanding. So that's all we're doing here, is putting on this pre-stain. And if you're going to do this, wear a respirator, because man, I inhaled all kinds of fumes. And then once I let that set in, now we're going to come back and use some penetrating stain here. And I chose one of the darker colors, and I've never stained anything before. I actually, take that back, in previous videos when I first started YouTube, I think I tried staining something, but I usually don't use this as a technique. And man, you ever done one of those projects where you love it, but you're not in love with it? That's definitely how this project turned out for me. So in the end, this is going to come out really a unique color in my opinion, but it doesn't look nearly as cool as I think I could have done it. But here we are putting the stain on, just doing a couple of different coats here. And essentially, in the beginning, I felt like it didn't take too well, so I'm like applying and reapplying 2 or 3 different times. And then I let that dry for about 24 hours, and then we're going to put the polyacrylic clear gloss on it. And again, another product I've never used before. And instead of doing epoxy with it, I just tried to do this technique. And I think overall for a table, it will work. But overall, using different kinds of techniques in this video, from the power carving to the staining, I think I could have done a lot better. But there will, of course, be a generation 2, 3, and so on of these tables. But you can see there just the splotchiness of the sanding, which you guys didn't see all of that. But overall, I think I did a pretty good job on this one. And this will be an indoor table. Why I'm using this polyacrylic, I don't even know. It just kind of seals in the table, I guess, and it's not epoxy. So just trying different techniques on the channel essentially. But here we are, and then we're going to do the post itself and then just come back and make sure we get every single portion of it. But you can see there, I mean, it's better than that square look to it in my opinion. And then those little holes that I tried filling on the top a couple of different times, I just came back and put some 15-minute epoxy resin and just dyed it black and said, okay, I think we're good. So in spite of all the problems that we initially had with this, I think overall this table came out okay. I'm in love with it, but I'm not in love with it. So this is what it looks like when it's all done. Granted, like up close, I don't see any of the splotchiness, but I think this color definitely, there's my dog trying to take a drink of water. I think it's better than just a boring pine table that we usually do on the channel. So it looks okay. It could be better. The power carving, I think for the first time doing that, looks okay. And then, you know, there's the view from the blimp. There's my beautiful looking dog. I think it looks okay. It's not the best table we've made, but it's definitely something different, and there will be more of these to come. So I hope you guys liked it. I liked building it. The only problem was it was 1,000 degrees in the state of Texas when I decided to do this. The next one definitely will be better, but you know, thanks for sticking with me to the end of the video. I really appreciate that, and I will be getting better, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Alright, peace.